Your son has cancer. You'd think those would be the worst words anyone could hear, but that was not the moment when my life fell apart. It was on a cold, rainy November evening in 1984 when I was greeted at the door by my father, who uttered the three words, "This is it." Earlier that evening, I'd been performing a minor lead role in my school Gilbert and Sullivan production of The Mikado. It was my final year at school, and we had an absolute ball that evening. My parents were in the audience, and I was really enjoying myself. I failed to notice when they left their seats partway through the performance, and it was only at the end when a teacher announced to me that I would be going home with a friend. And at that moment, I had no inclination that my life was about to change. That was the moment that I learned my brother had been killed in a motorcycle accident. Hours before, we'd been fighting like siblings do, especially siblings who were close together in age. And I had no idea that it would be the last time that I would see him alive. I went back to school on the Monday. No one knew how to be around me. My parents grieved in their way, and I carried on. I sat my A-levels and left home to study to be a physiotherapist. I began to build a life of my own. I graduated in 1998 and threw myself into a job that I truly loved. Being a physiotherapist, helping people, was something that I'd always hankered after, even as a small child bandaging teddies in my bedroom. Yet the loss really stayed with me and remained unprocessed for a long time. Years later, I became a mother. It was the millennium, and it was a time filled with joy, but tinged with sadness because of the loss that still dogged my everyday. I struggled with depression and anxiety, and so I was a prime candidate for postnatal depression, and I received counselling around that time, but that really didn't prepare me for what was to come. My firstborn son was named Ben, and he was a playful and happy child. It really came as a huge shock when we discovered that a mass that appeared quite rapidly in the region of the sacroiliac joint was actually a cancerous tumour. The tumour had been growing inside his abdomen since he was in utero. It was a germ cell tumour, a faulty cell running rogue, and over the time between his birth and his first birthday, this tumour had been gradually growing inside him. It reached a point where there was nowhere else for it to go apart from to extrude itself through the sacral notch. And that was when we became aware of something. At first, it was small and we took him to the doctor. And within a week, it had doubled in size. And the next thing we knew, we were being told to admit ourselves to the oncology unit in Southampton General Hospital. Again, a time of complete and utter trauma as your life goes past in a whirl. And so we set about supporting Ben through this terrible time of chemotherapy treatment. And he was very poorly. For the first 3 weeks, we spent isolated in a hospital room because he contracted MRSA. And so he and I were roommates for 3 weeks, and he was in the cot on a drip, unable to get out and move about and really not interacting, but just being very poorly. And I remember that it wasn't long since I'd actually stopped breastfeeding him. And I somehow recalled an article where breast milk, when put onto cancer cells in a petri dish, killed cancer cells. Now, I'm not suggesting that I thought breast milk was going to cure this tumour, but, as only a mother can really conceive that you would do anything to help your child. So breast milk to me seemed like the best medicine to support his health at that time. So I set about taking medication. Domperidone is a medication that can be used to stimulate breast milk production, and I started pumping. And it took hours and hours to fill a 4-ounce bottle, but the fact that I felt like I was doing something, and at the same time he was receiving some top-grade breast milk nutrition, that really helped me to feel like I was doing something. And so started my journey of exploration of natural approaches to optimize health and wellness. And so it wasn't long before I was stir crazy, stuck in a hospital room for 3 weeks with no company because of the MRSA bacterial infection. We couldn't mix with any of the other families, parents, children on the ward at the time. And so I asked the staff if they would bring me an exercise bike into the hospital room. I don't think they'd ever had a request quite like it, but to their credit, they managed to source, probably in the physiotherapy department, which is where I knew there would be one. They managed to source an exercise bike. And so while my son was being treated with chemotherapy and antibiotics and all of these other intravenous drugs, I would sit and ride on my exercise bike, which sounds a bit crazy, probably is quite crazy, but I'd already discovered that for me, movement was the best medicine for my mind. And so I'd already had quite a few years of experience of self-medicating with movement. There's not many disadvantages to using movement to medicate yourself, not many, as long as you don't overdo it, I suppose. So there we were in Southampton General Hospital, and it was summer. The birds would sing in the mornings. We were there together, the two of us, and it really was a time of bonding, I have to say. Fast forward 25 years, and Ben is a healthy young man who's physically active and fit and healthy. But that time that we spent in hospital, 40 days and 40 nights over the period of 6 months while he was under treatment, became a time when I was really delving deep into all of the approaches to optimize our health. The fact that Ben had cancer when he was 1 year old, and although childhood cancers are different to adult cancer, you can't help thinking that this is a start to life that you really wouldn't wish on anybody. And what on earth, he's been pumped full of all these toxic chemicals before he's even 2 years old. And what can I do? How can I help him to be as healthy as he possibly can be for the rest of his days? And so I was reading as much material as I possibly could to discover all the different approaches to health. And my focus really was on cancer prevention. But now that I've explored all the things that we can do to reduce the risk of cancer striking twice, it really came to my understanding that these are things that we can do to optimize our health, not just to guard against cancer, but heart disease and all sorts of other problems that we might face as we pass through life. Medicating ourselves with food, with movement, with the way in which we think, and the exposure to toxins in our environment. I was always helping others as a physiotherapist, but what I am able to do now is to really help people to embrace health in a more holistic sense. Our overall health and our metabolic health in particular impacts our musculoskeletal health. Our mood can have an impact on whether or not we experience pain So all of these things are so intertwined, and I really have developed that understanding of the different approaches that we as individuals can do to live happy, healthy, long lives. My lived experience is that of all the lifestyle factors that influence our overall health, the most powerful is movement. Regular exercise transforms us physically and mentally and guards against illness and disease. It is a powerful, natural way to feel better, stay strong, and thrive through life. Movement is medicine, and it's never too late to start. I had to navigate this path because of the cards that I was dealt. I know that I am not alone in dealing with these kinds of health challenges and life events. But if I can help somebody else in a similar situation, then that makes all of this totally worthwhile.